today I will speak on Green theorem. Namely the hyperbolicity of P2 of C minus 5 lines in general position. General position means you don't have triple points. So you don't have 3 lines intersecting one point like that. You know that in P2, 2 lines intersect always, but you don't. So you have plenty of double points in this situation, but you don't like to have triple points. Okay. This statement in the complex case boils down it's not difficult to see that via Brody's lemma. To the following statement. There is no non-constant entire curve. So some holomorphic image of C, like yesterday, in P2 of C minus these 5 lines. So sitting inside P2 of C and avoiding these 5 lines. It can be a little bit more precise. When you apply this Brody lemma, what you obtain is not only a non-constant entire curve, but what is called a non-constant, actually, Brody curve. So what does it mean, a Brody curve? Here, this is an entire curve which is non-constant, but its derivative is uniformly bounded. So a Brody curve if it is holomorphic and its derivative measured in the any metric on P2 of C, say the Fubini-Studi metric, if you want, and here in the usual Euclidean metric on C. So you get more when applying this Brody's lemma. You get a bit of information about the derivative, and this will be used in some sense in what follows. So actually, what I have to prove in order to prove this hyperbolicity of P2 of C minus 5 lines is that there is no Brody curve non-constant into P2 of C minus 5 lines. Okay? So let's try now to do that in the complex case, and after that I will explain a little bit what happens in the almost complex case. What is the difference? And this is the easiest example of an hyperbolic manifold in in dimension 2, actually. It's the first example. So if you want to do some hyperbolicity in the almost complex case, you should be able to do that in the almost complex case. If not, so this is what I want to do today. So the proof I will present is the most geometrical in some sense, in order to be able to pass it to the almost complex case. And so I will explain it now. There are some tools which I will use. The first tool is the positivity of intersection of holomorphic disks. Meaning the following: when you have two surfaces which are orientable inside a four-dimensional manifold, which is also orientable, when you look at the intersection point between the two surfaces, you are able to put a sign on this intersection point, playing with the two bases given by the orientation of the two surfaces, and comparing them with the ambient oriented basis. So you are able to put a sign, and in the case your two surfaces are complex curves or complex disks locally, this sign is always positive, +1. Okay? So when you intersect two disks, then the sign of intersection is always +1 when they intersect transversally like that. Okay? This is not. This is really a complex phenomenon and not a real one. For instance, when you draw such a picture in the R2 with two segments, here you have two intersection points, and depending on the orientation you put here, you have here +1 and there -1. Okay? This is a real case. And this picture in the real case means that you can deform this picture in order to destroy this intersection. Okay? The two signs together give 0. So in some homological way, you compute the intersection globally, you get 0. And actually, in some geometrical way, you can deform this picture into two disjoint arcs. So this cannot be the case for complex disks. So this positivity of intersection gives you a persistence of intersection. So I will give you a statement. You have given some holomorphic disk delta prime, and say n/1 delta, like that. Assume that delta intersect delta prime, and delta is not contained in delta prime. Now, suppose that delta is the limit of some sequence of disk. Still holomorphic. Then the conclusion is just before the limit, for n big enough, the holomorphic disk delta n intersected also delta prime. Which is clear when the intersections are transversal, like that, but which is less clear when the intersections are tangent, because I cannot draw really a picture in the real case of things like that. This is completely forbidden in the complex case. So this is forbidden in the complex case. Okay? So this is my first tool. My second tool will be to look at normal family of holomorphic disks, because I want to be able to apply this persistence of intersection. So I want to have some sequence of disks converging to some limit. So the second tool is the normal families of holomorphic disks or the non-normal family of holomorphic disks. The statement, which is completely classical, is the following. If you start with holomorphic disks which are now parametrized, say into P2, but it doesn't really matter, P2. It should be some compact complex manifold. Then this sequence is normal. Meaning up to some subsequence you might be able to have a limit. If and only if the derivative of Fn is locally uniformly bounded. Again, this derivative is measured in some metric. Okay? This is really Ascoli theorem. And the fact that the limit is holomorphic is really the fact that some uniform limit of holomorphic map is still holomorphic. And now, if your family is non-normal, then it can be taken into account by precisely this Brody lemma. When non-normal, according to this statement, this means that in some point or in some sequence of points which are not going to the boundary of the disk, the derivative of Fn has to blow up. Okay, And then you can make this process of reparametrization due to Brody in order to get a Brody curve at the limit. Then there exists, according to Brody, there exists a sequence of reparametrization of C, such that this composition converge up to some extraction toward an entire curve, which is actually a Brody curve. Okay, so this is a picture for a sequence of disks. Either they are normal, so you get a limit which is an holomorphic disk, or they are not normal, but you get still something, but by reparametrization, you get an entire curve. The picture is roughly the following. So this reparametrization is a sequence of contraction. Affine contraction, like that. So this reparametrization converges to a point, actually. So it's a bit paradoxical. So you compose with something which converges to the point, but you get something which is non-constant at the end. But it's really because you compensate the blow-up of the derivative of Fn by a big contraction of the derivative of Phi. So the picture is like that. You have the disk at the source. You have some blowing up of Fn. And you reparametrize by looking to this blow-up point by some big contraction, and you compose them. So when you compose them, you get something which is with a large domain, larger and larger, like C at the end. And you have tame the derivative again. So the derivative is now uniformly bounded. And so you can pass to the limit. I think it's the only common point with yesterday is this Brody name. So this is the second tool. Now, so I will prove the statement. There is no Brody curve non-constant Brody curve in P2 minus 5 lines with the following method. So I will proceed by contradiction. Suppose you add a non-constant Brody curve like that in P2 minus these 5 lines. What you will do is the following. You take this Brody curve, and you start by analyzing its image. Actually, you will close the image. So this is the closure of the image. And so it is some compact K in P2 of C. Okay? The claim is that this compact has to touch the lines you avoided at the beginning. because you have some closure. So the contradiction will be just as follow. First, K has to intersect the union of the file lines. And second, K has to avoid this union of 5 lines. This is only this point. To get these 2 points, so this is a contradiction. To get these 2 points, I will rely on some lemma. K is foliated in some sense by disks coming from the Brody curve. So I will. So this is a vague statement. I will make it more precise just now. So more precisely, take any point inside K. Then there exists a disk, holomorphic disk, passing through P, which is a limit in the sense of this normal family of a sequence of disk delta n so this is some holomorphic disk through P, non-constant. And delta n is a holomorphic disk sitting inside the entire curve I started with. Okay? Not only P is a limit of sequence of points inside the entire curve, which is the very definition of a closure, but it sits inside a holomorphic disk, which itself is the limit of a holomorphic disk inside the entire curve. Okay? So this is my meaning of foliated by disk coming from the Brody curve. Now, first, K has to intersect the union of lines. Actually, is even more precise than that. It contains the union of lines. Now, K suppose you are given one of those lines, L1, and suppose that L, so proceed by contradiction, suppose that L1 does not intersect K first. Then what you do, so K is here. Inside K, you have this entire curve, which is dense. Okay. What you do is you try to deform a bit L1 in such a way that you will touch K at the end. So you start by picking a point P inside L1, and you deform it until it touches K by fixing P. So you have a whole pencil of line through P. So you are able to make such a deformation. Okay. Now you look at the first touching point. So here you are given this point Q inside K, and so you are given also a sequence of holomorphic your holomorphic disk delta, which is the conclusion of this lemma, which is the limit of sequence of holomorphic disk inside the entire curve, like that. Okay. Now, what you know is that delta is not completely inside this line L1. And so the contradiction proceeds just by deforming a little bit this L1 before, and getting so you deform L1 into L1 double tilde, and it doesn't intersect. Delta at all, and this cannot be the case due to the persistence of intersection of holomorphic disk. This is impossible due to the persistence of intersection of holomorphic disk. Okay. Now, so what you get like that is that any line inside the configuration of 5 lines has to cut this compact K. Yeah? So why the disk cannot be inside? So why the disk is not inside? So if you had such a situation like that, so what you know is L1 tilde intersected with K is non-empty. So it's closed. Okay. It's not all, because this point is fixed outside K. And so it cannot be open. So by an argument of connectivity, it is not open. Inside L1 tilde is not open in L1 tilde. Okay? That means that at least for some point, say this point Q, the whole disk passing through delta passing through Q in K cannot be entirely sitting inside L1 tilde. Okay, this is the answer to the question. Is it correct? Who asked this question? Yes, it's okay. So you believe this? Fine. Everybody believes that? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the question. So this argument, I will use it again. Okay. And so at this point, any lines inside this configuration, so L1, L5, inside the union of 5 lines, should be intersecting K. This is precisely what I proved before. Now I have a bit more than that, actually. Any such line is in K. And the reason is exactly this kind of argument I mentioned just here. Reason. The intersection between Li and K is non-empty. It's closed because you intersect two closed sets. And now it should be open. Inside Li. Conclusion, it should be all Li. Conclusion, Li is included inside K. Why it should be open? This is again the persistence of intersection. So I take Li, I take a point Q inside K on this line Li. According to this lemma I mentioned before, there exists a disk delta, which is the limit of disks, and delta n is sitting inside the entire curve. And so, sitting inside the entire curve, it has to avoid Li by the very definition of my Brody curve. Okay? So I should have this picture of a sequence of disks outside the line and touching at the limit the line. The only possibility to do that is for delta to be completely included inside Li. So this implies, okay, this implies by the persistence of intersection that delta is included inside Li. So this picture is not true, and that one is true. Meaning that Q is in the interior of intersection with K on the line. Okay? And so it should be open, and by connectivity, the whole line should sit inside K. Now, so like that, I fulfilled the first point. I have to intersect K. Even more than that, all the configuration of line has to sit inside K. And now I will attack the second point, why it is not possible. So where is the contradiction? Sorry? This? Because by the very definition, so again, I write it down the same line. So, and this is my entire curve avoids at the beginning the whole set of lines. Okay. But what I just proved modulo some lemma is that its closure does not avoid the set of lines. And this is not already a contradiction, but it has to contain actually the whole set of lines now. And I go to the contradiction. So it is not possible. And this will be seen at some special points of the configuration of lines, namely the double points. Look at double points. So I have two lines like that. According to what I mentioned just here, the double point P, intersection of L1 and L2, is in K. Okay? That means that there exists through it some disk which is limit of delta n coming from the entire curve. So there is a disk here passing through this point. I cannot draw it actually. So we saw just before that this picture is not possible. This disk has to sit inside the line which was avoided before. Delta has to sit inside L1, but it has also to sit inside L2 because this is a double point. It's exactly the same argument as here, by persistence of intersection. And so it has to sit in the intersection of two, so it has to be constant. And this is a contradiction because it's a genuine disk, non-constant disk through P. This is impossible. Okay? So this is the scheme of the proof, modulo this lemma, telling you that the closure of the anterior curve is foliated by disks coming from it. So I will speak a little bit about this lemma. So I take a point P or Q in the closure which does not belong to the anterior curve itself, because if it is the case, I have nothing to prove. Huh? Say, and I want to produce this sequence of holomorphic disks going to a limit which is non-trivial and passing through Q. Okay? So the way to do that is the following. You will analyze the situation under some central projection. So analyze the situation under a central projection centered into a double point of the situation. So centered on a double point of the configuration. Like that. So I will draw a picture. So I have L1, L2. I have my center of projection. And I have some point Q, which is in the closure of the anterior curve. And so I want to choose the situation in such a way, in such a general way, that it looks exactly like that. So P has to be different of Q. The two lines does not pass through Q, and etc., etc. You have sufficiently many lines to play with to achieve this. Okay? And now the central projection is just take any line here, and you want to project like that any point toward this point here. You take the one line passing through P and R, and you draw it, and you intersect this line. You get a projection like that. Which is defined outside the point P and with value inside some P1 of C, which is this line. Okay? This is a classical object in elementary projective geometry. Now, your anterior curve is adherent to Q, so it looks like that. It should look like that. If it is looking like that, precisely I have a sequence of disks going to some disk which will pass through Q. Okay? And this is what I want to achieve exactly. So why this anterior curve does look like that? The reason is the following. So I project this anterior curve with respect to pi. So I consider J, which is the composition pi composed with F from C to P1. Actually, because you avoid these two lines, L1 and L2. So because L1 and L2 are avoided, the value is inside P1 of C minus 2 points, actually. So minus 2 points, say minus 0, infinity. So this is C star. Now there is a bit of analysis. First, your curve is a Brody curve, so it has a slow growth somehow. Second, your projection also has a projection of a slow growth curve, should be of slow growth. And third, it avoids 2 points, so it sits inside C star. That means when you achieve the analysis up to the end, that G should be like just exponential of Z. It's not completely true, but it's almost true. It's exponential of a polynomial of degree 2, actually, at most. So think of it as being just exponential of Z. What I keep from that information is only that the projection like that is a covering map. This is a covering map. Is?
The projection is not constant.
The projection is non-constant because the entire curve cannot sit inside a line passing through P. Why? The reason is so why the entire curve cannot be sitting inside a line like that? Because it avoids L1, L2, but it avoids also L3, L4, L5. So you have L3 here. Maybe you should have, you may have L4 like that with a double point here, but at least you have L5 here. So if it were sitting inside this line, it will be inside P1 of C minus this point, that point, and the third point here. So it should be sitting inside the P1 of C minus 3 points. And this is forbidden by Picard theorem. Okay? So we rely on a Picard theorem. So the projection cannot be constant. So this is a good question because I will use it just after again this. So you are always preceding the argument. So do you agree with that? Yes? Okay. So this is a covering map. It looks like exponential of Z, if you want. And now the picture I draw here will be really true, actually. So why? So again, the same picture. So I have Q here. I have my projection onto some line, and I have P of Q here. And I draw a small disk around it inside this line. So I take delta, a small disk, inside this line. Because the composition pi composed with F is a covering map, that means that the pre-image of this delta should be a sequence of disks which are projected homeomorphically onto the disk delta. Okay? Now, when you interpret this in a more geometrical way, looking at delta n being the image of those disks, what you see is exactly the picture I draw here. So through this projection, like that, you see a sequence of disks which are graphs and going to Q. These are those delta n. Delta n are graphs. On delta. Delta n are contained by definition in the entire curve. And they converge to Q. There is a point in them converging to Q. I can achieve this. Now, I want to pass to the limit to get really my delta, which is the big delta I wanted. Well, maybe I should put a big delta n. I want to pass to the limit. In order to be able to pass to the limit, I want to have a normal family. If I don't have a normal family, that means really that the derivative of the parameterization of those graphs should blow up somewhere. And you will be able to apply Brody lemma to get an entire curve at the limit. And I will show you in a picture what happens. So if not, you have the following picture. So I enlarge a little bit the situation here. So I have my point Q, a sequence of disks like that. And somehow the derivative blows up. That means the following picture. So you will have things like that. Even as a graph, the derivative has to blow up. So you get something like that with a sharp slope, like that. And when you apply really Brody lemma, this implies that when you reparameterize the things, you will get an entire curve sitting vertically, exactly as before. So you get an entire curve sitting in a fiber of pi. And now the discussion is exactly as what I said here. This cannot be possible because this entire curve has a limit of things coming from the entire curve avoiding the lines, should avoid 3 points on it, but it is non-constant by Brody lemma. Non-constant entire curve sitting in a fiber of P, but by persistence of intersection, it should avoid the 5 lines still. And this is impossible by Picard. Okay, and this is more or less the end of the proof. So you see, this proof is quite geometrical. It uses tools which are available in the almost complex case, actually. And so it passes through the almost complex case. So maybe I will say a word in the almost complex setting. I will mention a difference. So in the almost complex case, so I will precise a little bit what I mean by that. So I take still P2 of C. I take its usual Keller form, so the Fubini-Studi Keller form, to be simple. And I start to deform the complex structure in an almost complex structure. So I take any almost complex structure, which is tamed by omega in such a way that this form is positive. So in this case, coming from the very situation in the classical case and by deforming it, Gromov says that you have a lot of, so I will call this a J projective plane or something like that. In this case, Gromov says that you have a lot of J lines inside it. So what is a J line? This is a geomorphic image of P1 of C. So take P1 of C with its usual structure. So take actually some embedding of this, which is EJ holomorphic, into P2 with this J structure. Okay, and which is an embedding. And moreover, the image is homologous to the same class of homology as the usual lines. Is of degree 1. Okay, this is a J line, and you have plenty of them. Actually, you have as many of them as the usual lines. That means the set of lines of J lines form a P2 of C itself, which is the dual of the initial P2. So the set of lines is diffeomorphic to P2 of C. Moreover, from the point of view of the incidence relations, it behaves exactly like in the classical case. So incidence are the same. What I mean by that, through two different points, through P distinct from Q, passes a unique J line. So given 2 points, you make pass one and one simple one J line. Two different lines has to intersect and intersect only once. So this is two different J lines. like that. And
Like this is only for this case.
yes. It's a very special case, yes, sure. And moreover, you can think of all the lines passing through a point, and this is a pencil of lines, which is parameterized by P1 of C, and which gives rise to a central projection as well. So through a given point, you look at all the lines passing through it. So the set of G lines through P is P1 of C. So it's a pencil of line. And gives rise to a central projection of a center P. So this implies a central projection like that, exactly like in the classical case, from P2 of C minus P in P1 of C. Okay? Moreover, the persistence of intersection does hold also in the almost complex case. Two different J holomorphic disks intersect positively. It's exactly the same. It's harder to show in the almost complex case, but it's still true. And moreover, Brody lemma is available, so everything goes through. So that means that the proof goes through. I should mention a slight difference. So the only difference which gives some technical troubles, but I already hid them in the analytic complex classical case. Only difference, this projection is not anymore holomorphic, but it's only a quasi-conformal. I should, not pi, but the composition, so G, the composition with respect to pi, the G I spoke of before, is not anymore holomorphic because of the properties of this projection. It's only quasi-conformal, but quasi-conformal. So you have some trouble to use it, but you can do it by invoking Alfors-Behr's theorem, which tells you that such a map up to some composition by some homeomorphism, quasi-conformal homeomorphism of C can be think of holomorphic itself. So it gives some trouble, but not much. So this is what I wanted to say about the quasi-conformal case, almost complex case. So it goes through. So in the remaining time, so I will stop certainly before, which is perfect for me, I hope for you. I should mention first the reference for that. So it's a paper of mine. The title is un théorème de Green presque complexe. It's published here. I think it's 54. At least this is the good year, 2004. I should mention also some extension or some possible extensions. So the next classical statement about after this one, this green statement, is the so-called Borel theorem. Which, by the way, is the something like 80 years before the first one. Doesn't matter. Which tells the following: if you look at not 5 lines inside P2, but 4 lines inside P2, what is the situation from the point of view of the hyperbolicity, of the presence or absence of entire curves, and so on? The general philosophy, maybe you have understood that last week, is when you lower the number of components you want to avoid, the more difficult the problem is, actually. So the Borel theorem says the following. If you start from an entire map, not only Brody, so any entire map, non-constant, sitting inside P2 minus 4 lines in general position, then they do exist, such entire curves, but they are very special. They are sitting inside lines themselves, so they degenerate linearly. And actually, those lines are also very special. They are one of the 3 diagonals of the situation. So of the configuration. So Borel proof was by means of homogeneous coordinates, Wronskians, so differential equations, if you want, on the entire curve. And so it's really related with the talk by Jean-Pierre de Mailly, but it is only some basic instance of this more sophisticated tools. So I will draw you some diagonals. So you start with a situation of 4 lines, say something like that. So I'll draw you one diagonal. So this is D1. This is a line passing through only 2 points of the configuration. And so D1 minus the union of Ly is isomorphic to C star. It's not P1 minus 3 points, it's P1 minus 2 points, and there are entire curve inside C star, like exponential of Z. Okay? There are entire curves sitting here. This is one of the diagonal. The other is that one. And so this is D2. And the other one is less signable, but so you have to prolonge. And you get something like that. Okay? All the entire curves outside this configuration should be sitting inside these 3 lines. This is the statement of Borel. And it is even true for any entire curve, not only for Brody curves. And so this statement has been generalized to the almost complex case by tools more or less similar with what I spoke about today, but a little bit more sophisticated still. And this is a paper by Benoît Saller, the same as yesterday, which is called, which is a preprint on arXiv, which will be published here, but not yet, and which is called un théorème not the Borel, but the block, presque complex. So there is a certain similarity. Maybe to finish, I will ask some questions, some open questions. Which I cannot answer yet in the almost complex case. The next step after this Green or Borel theorem in this situation, in P2, in a very simple situation, is the following. So I will state it in a vague phrase, and I will describe it a little bit more precisely after. What about the second main theorem? In the almost complex case. So what is the second main theorem in the complex case, so in the usual case? So I will explain it a little bit. So I don't know. So just to say that there is something to be done in the almost complex case if we want to understand more. Actually, we should have a proof of that as soon as we have sufficiently geometrical proof of the classical case. And this I don't know. So what is the second main theorem? So it goes back to Nevanlinna-Cartan. So it's the beginning of the 90s, so it's quite old. It is a way to have a quantitative version of Borel theorem, let's say. In the case of Nevanlinna, it was a quantitative version of Picard theorem. In case of Cartan, it was a quantitative version of Borel theorem. So I will stick to this Borel situation because I spoke about it just today. So what does it mean? If you start with an entire curve, non-constant, even non-linearly degenerate entire curve, so non-constant and even non-sitting inside the line. So not like in the conclusion of Borel theorem. We say non-linearly degenerated. Then, given 4 lines, you are sure, according to Borel, that this entire curve should hit those lines. The union of those lines. Cannot avoid them completely, because I took something which is non-linearly degenerated. And Cartan theorem is a way to make this very precise. So Cartan implies that the characteristic function of the entire curve, which measures its growth, is less than the counting function of this heating point. So plus some error term. So in particular, as this function grows, you cannot have 0 here. It will grow more than this error time. Okay? So this is a way to make quantitative the Borel statement. And now I will just explain what those quantities are. So what is this characteristic function, T of f? It's only the way the area of increasing disk inside the entire curve grows. So it's a bit related of what I spoke about yesterday. So you take here the area of the image of the disk of radius t inside the C. And so it's not this exactly, it's something which is integrated. So against some mass, which is exactly that one. This, the choice of this quantity to understand the growth of f goes back to Nevanlinna. It's a very clever way. If you don't put this integral, you won't be such a statement like that. So this is the characteristic function here. And now the counting function, let's say for n, for L1, this one. It's exactly defined in the same way. You look at some integral like that, and you count inside the disk of radius t the hitting point with L1. So the number with multiplicity take such an expression. So I've defined all the terms of the second main theorem. So this is quite, even in the classical situation, it's not an obvious theorem. And so we would like to have some better understanding of it in a geometrical way in order to pass it to the almost complex case. By the way, all these quantities are very well defined in the almost complex case. So I will stop here.